Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Joanne Davey. We warmly welcome the family of Corporal Francis Middleton Shaw, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Francis Middleton Shaw. Francis Shaw was born in Hobart on the 7th of May 1895. Known as Frank, he was the youngest son of the Reverend William Shaw and his wife Kate. When he was a child, Frank's family relocated to South Australia, where he attended school at Moonta and later Adelaide. At the outbreak of war in 1914, he was working as a farmer at Middleton on the Yorke Peninsula, west of Adelaide. Francis Shaw enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 1st of February 1916. He joined South Australia's newly formed 43rd Battalion and embarked from Adelaide on the 9th of June on board the troopship Afrique. After briefly landing in Egypt, Private Shaw arrived in England in August 1916, where he commenced further training with his battalion. 3 months later, Shaw embarked for the Western Front, arriving at the end of November in time to spend the bitterly cold winter of 1916 to 1917 in the trenches around Ypres in Belgium. Private Shaw's first major battle was at Mézine in June 1917, where the Allies were attempting to capture the Mézine-Wytschaete Ridge south of the Ypres salient. While in the front lines at Mézine, Private Shaw was wounded for the first time, sustaining a gunshot wound to his hand, which necessitated a long recovery behind the lines. Shaw rejoined his unit at the end of September 1917 as his unit prepared for a large-scale attack on Brucinda Ridge on the 4th of October. During this battle, Private Shaw was wounded for the second time while advancing through heavy enemy shelling and machine gun fire. He sustained severe wounds to his left arm and leg and was evacuated to hospital. The attack on Brucinda Ridge was largely a success, but it cost Australian units more than 6,000 casualties. After recovering from his injuries, Private Shaw was granted leave in England and then rejoined his battalion in January 1918 as it was involved in fighting around the Somme Valley in France. In February, Shaw was again hospitalised owing to illness and spent several months recovering behind the lines before returning to the front in May 1918, ahead of the Battle of Hamel. The battle took place on the 4th of July 1918, with the Allies attempting to capture the town of Hamel and the surrounding areas. As the battle began, Shaw's platoon was caught under heavy machine gun fire, which inflicted many casualties, including its platoon officer. Rushing forward, Shaw engaged the enemy gun, an act which enabled his men to reach the post and bayonet the garrison. About 10 minutes after the Allied barrage ceased, Shaw engaged another enemy machine gun, firing his Lewis gun from the hip when a German officer attempted to shoot him with a revolver and missed. Shaw shot the officer before knocking out another enemy soldier with the butt end of his gun. On reaching enemy lines, Shaw recovered 2 Australians who had been taken prisoner and returned them to safety. In the aftermath of the battle, Shaw engaged the enemy for a 4th time when large numbers of German soldiers were found on the eastern edge of the village. This enabled his unit to take 3 enemy machine guns and 20 prisoners. Private Shaw was promoted to Lance Corporal and later awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal for his actions. Following the battle, Lance Corporal Shaw was granted leave in Paris. He rejoined his unit in August and was promoted to Corporal before the Battle of Amiens on the 8th of August 1918. On the night of the 12th of August 1918, as the Allies continued their advance, the 43rd Battalion was engaged in action against the enemy at Proart, attempting to secure the Méricourt on the south side of the Somme River. Shaw was advancing in the face of heavy enemy artillery fire when he was hit by shrapnel from an exploding shell and wounded for a 3rd time. Badly hit, he was tended to by stretcher bearers on the field. His comrade lit a cigarette for him as he was carried away to the casualty clearing station, where he succumbed to his wounds. News of Corporal Shaw's death reached his family in South Australia with a letter of condolence from Captain Colliver, who wrote, "Frank was a beloved of all for his sterling qualities and Christian manhood. He was never known to do anything that would pain or bring discredit to his loved ones. I well remember one day Frank was interviewed by Captain Bean, the war correspondent, regarding his exploit in the Battle of Hamel, and afterwards Captain Bean remarked to me that Frank was one of the finest types of Australian he had met. Trusting you are bearing up during this time of sorrow, and I earnestly pray that eventually that which is now a cross may be turned into the sweetest memories." Francis Shaw was buried at Heath Cemetery, near where he fell. He was 23 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Francis Middleton Shaw, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.